Here's a sentence that has convinced millions of people to make the worst financial decision of their life. Renting is throwing money away. That sentence sounds true, it feels true, and it is almost completely wrong. Stick with me for the next 14 minutes because by the end of this, you're going to look at your own housing decision completely differently and you might realize you've had it backwards this whole time. Let's start with the myth everyone repeats without checking the math. The idea is simple. If you rent, that money disappears every month. If you buy, you're building equity. So buying always wins, right? Except that's not how money actually works. Because when you buy a home, you're not just paying a mortgage, you're paying interest on that mortgage. And in the early years, sometimes the first 10 to 15 years, the majority of every payment you make goes straight to the bank as interest, not equity, interest. So that equity you think you're building, for the first decade, it's often growing slower than you'd expect, sometimes barely at all. Now, here's the part nobody tells you. When you rent, yes, that money is gone, but when you own, a huge chunk of your money is also gone. It just goes to a different set of people. The bank gets interest, the government gets property tax, the roofer gets paid when the roof leaks, the plumber gets paid when the pipes burst. Owning isn't the absence of money disappearing. It's just a different list of who it disappears to. Let's talk numbers, but not in a specific currency, because this math works the same whether you're in any country on earth with any currency. We'll talk in percentages and multiples so you can apply it to your own numbers wherever you live. Here is a widely used rule among financial analysts. Buying a home only tends to beat renting if you plan to stay in that home for at least 5 to 7 years. Below that window, renting usually wins. And most people have no idea this threshold even exists. Why 5 to 7 years? Because of something almost nobody accounts for, transaction costs. When you buy a property, you typically pay somewhere between 2 and 5% of the property's value just in fees, legal costs, inspection costs, loan origination fees, taxes on the transaction itself. And when you sell, you often pay another 5 to 6% in agent commissions and closing costs. Add that up. On a typical purchase, you could be losing 8 to 10% of the property's value just to the act of buying and then selling it. That's not appreciation lost. That's money gone before you even factor in the mortgage. So if property values in your area are rising at a normal pace of around 3 to 4% a year, it can take several years just to earn back the money you lost in transaction fees. Sell too early, and you might actually lose money on a home that went up in value. This is the part real estate agents don't lead with. Now let's talk about the sentence that changes everything: opportunity cost. When you buy a home, you usually need a down payment, often 10 to 20% of the property's value, sitting there in cash. That money is now locked into one single asset. It's not earning you anything else. It's not invested. It's not flexible. It's concrete and drywall. But what if instead you rented and invested that same down payment plus the monthly difference between rent and a mortgage payment into a diversified investment portfolio? Historically, broad stock market investments have returned somewhere around 7 to 10% annually over long periods before adjusting for inflation. Real estate in most markets has historically appreciated at a slower average pace, often in the 3 to 5% range annually. That gap matters more than people think. Compounded over quality time, even a few percentage points of difference can turn into a massive gap in wealth. This doesn't mean renting always wins. It means the math is far closer and far more situational than renting is throwing money away would have you believe. Let's flip to the other side now. because buying absolutely has real advantages, and I'm not here to tell you renting is always smarter. That would be just as dishonest as the opposite claim. Here's what buying gives you that renting never can: a fixed housing cost that doesn't rise with the market. If you take out a fixed rate mortgage, your core payment stays the same for the life of the loan: 20, 25, even 30 years. Meanwhile, rent tends to rise almost every single year. Over a couple of decades, that gap compounds hard. Long-term owners with fixed payments often end up with dramatically lower housing costs later in life, right around the time their income may not be growing as fast either, like retirement. That's a real, powerful advantage. It's not emotional, it's structural. Buying also gives you something renting fundamentally can't: control. Nobody can decide not to renew your lease. Nobody can sell the property out from under you. You can renovate. You can paint the walls whatever color you want. You can plant a tree and watch it grow for 30 years. That has value. Even if it's not always a value, you can put a clean number on. But here's where people get it wrong in the other direction too. They treat owning a home as an investment, the same way they treat stocks or a business. And a home is a uniquely bad investment compared to almost everything else, for one simple reason. It's the only major investment most people make where they also have to live inside it, maintain it, insure it, and pay taxes on it every single year, whether it goes up in value or not. Think about the ongoing hidden costs of owning that never show up in the sticker price. Property taxes, typically ranging from 0.5% to over 2% of the home's value every single year, forever. Homeowners insurance, regular maintenance, which financial planners generally estimate at around 1 to 2% of the home's value annually. New roofs, broken water heaters, cracked foundations, dying appliances. Add all of that up over a decade, and it can easily equal another 10 to 20% of the property's value quietly in the background that almost nobody calculates before they buy. So, who should actually buy? Let's get specific. Buying tends to make sense. If you're staying put for the long haul, call it 7 years or more. It tends to make sense if your income and job situation are stable, so a fixed payment is genuinely an advantage rather than a trap. It tends to make sense if you have enough saved that a down payment doesn't wipe out your emergency fund, because owning without a cushion is how small problems turn into financial disasters. Renting, on the other hand, makes enormous sense if you value flexibility, if your career might move you to a new city, if you're not sure where you want to plant roots yet, if you want your money working in diversified investments rather than locked into one property in one location. And here's the mindset shift that matters more than any spreadsheet. Renting isn't failing to buy. Renting is buying yourself flexibility, liquidity, and optionality, and those things have real financial value, even though nobody puts them on a balance sheet. Now let's talk about the emotional trap, because this is where most people actually lose. Buying a home has become tied to identity, to making it, to being seen as a responsible adult by your parents, your friends, your society. And that emotional pressure pushes people to buy at the wrong time, in the wrong market, with the wrong numbers, just to feel like they've crossed some invisible finish line. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A bad financial decision doesn't become a good one just because it comes with a set of keys and a housewarming party. So, how do you actually make this decision for yourself right now using your own numbers? Here's a simple framework. Take the total cost of buying the property price, plus estimated annual taxes, insurance, and maintenance, minus what you'd expect to get back when you eventually sell. Compare that to the total cost of renting an equivalent property over the same number of years, plus what you could realistically earn by investing the difference between the two options. Whichever number is smaller over your actual expected timeline in that specific home is your answer, not what your parents did, not what feels emotionally satisfying. The actual number for your actual situation in your actual market. And one more thing worth saying clearly, this decision isn't permanent. Renting now doesn't mean renting forever. Buying now doesn't mean you're locked in forever either, though it's a lot more expensive to reverse. The smartest financial decision is often just doing whatever makes sense for the next 5 to 10 years of your specific life and reassessing when your circumstances change. So here's where I'll leave you. The next time someone tells you that renting is throwing money away, you can tell them the truth. Money doesn't disappear when you rent, it just goes somewhere else. And sometimes, somewhere else is a diversified investment account quietly compounding while your landlord deals with the broken water heater at 2 in the morning. Buying isn't always winning, renting isn't always losing. The only real losing move is making a 6 or 7 figure decision based on a sentence you heard once and never actually did the math on. So do the math for your city, for your income, for your actual timeline. Because that number, not the emotion, not the pressure, not the housewarming party, that number is the only thing that's actually going to tell you which one is right for you.